Welcome back to the MizzouToday Show. All National Signing Day recap day for this episode. I know there's bowl games right around the corner, and we'll talk about that next week with whatever Mizzou gets assigned, and we'll maybe talk about the finish of the season for football, and maybe if there's any more transfer portal news, we'll get to that as well. But it's National Signing Day recap. Kenny Van Doren, your host on Three Rivals Network, always joined by Kyle. Kyle, looking at this one, I'm going to just throw it over to you. I mean, we've done this before where we talked about recruiting in the bye week. This is technically a bye week. There's going to be a couple of these before the bowl game gets announced, and we know where Mizzou's going. But you take it away.
Yeah, I mean, more importantly than it, just not having a football game to talk about this week, it was National Signing Day, or at least, the opening of the early signing period. And Mizzou signed 19 players, right? 10 offensive, 9 defensive. And I think we probably need to kind of run people through some of these additions, key guys to talk about, and maybe what the strategy was a little bit. So I figure we can start on the offense, and, no better place to start than the quarterback. So the Tigers signed Gavin Sidward. Can you tell me just what you know about him and kind of the outlook for the future at that position right now?
Yeah, so 3 straight signing classes. 2027 will be the same if Braylon Warren, who committed here on Thursday. We were planning to record this a little earlier, but he announced his commitment. It's recording here around 3 p.m. on Thursday, the day after the early signing period opened. So 3 straight. This will be back-to-back years that the longest tenured commit was the quarterback. Of course, in 2025, it was Matt Zollers. There were 2 commits before Gavin Sidwar in the 2026 class. DeMonte Timms, a safety from Florida, and of course Anthony Kennedy Jr., longtime target, even got targeted again the past couple months by Missouri, and he signed with Arkansas. So those are the 2 that were in front of him. But Gavin has been around for a long time. He's seen the ups and downs of the recruiting world. He's seen the ups and downs of ratings. Once a 4-star, ranked inside the top 250 by Rivals before the merger with On3. Wasn't always pleased with it. Like a lot of, it's like any teenager, like any high schooler, you believe in yourself and you believe in your potential. And but he really kind of just took himself out of the national spotlight for a while and really focused on his senior season. And you got a shout out from Drinkwitz. He's got a strong arm, very good pocket presence. He had the same quarterback coach in high school this past year, and Tim Taggart, who was the personal coach of Matt Zoller. So, of course, a Pennsylvania connection and a little bit different style of quarterback, though. A lot of the highlights we saw, too, of Matt when he was in high school, and you've seen it in college and the games that he started and played in, is that he can really get on the move. Matt can run the ball, too. It's not just throwing. There was a lot of, plays and highlights at high school, too, at spring forward, where he'd go on the move and throw the ball. Gavin, one thing that pointed out that really stuck with me that Tim Taggart mentioned months ago is that he's more of like a pocket guy. You talk about the presence and, the ability to run the football and have a mobility. It was more like mobility in the pocket for Gavin. He knows how to stay in there. He knows how to avoid sacks. He knows when he needs to get out, just like how Zollers has really grown as that kind of passer as well. So that was something that really resonated with me. And I think that kind of fits Gavin's whole MO. He's very kind of straightforward kind of guy. And he has some moxie and some swagger to him, like many quarterbacks do. But I think he's also very, straightforward, gets to the point in what he's doing. And I tagged him as a possible best interview. I really liked talking to Braylon Ellison, but that's, a good thing too, that your quarterback is one of the best, this one of the smartest guys on the field. So coming over from Pennsylvania, LaSalle still playing this weekend. They got a state championship game. They only lost 1 game this year, and now they're going to the state title.
Yeah, Drinkwitz brought up the arm talent specifically in his press conference this week, and I'll kind of sprinkle in what Drinkwitz talked about as we move through here. But that was the biggest thing, and then kind of like you brought up, he's playing for the state championship this week. So Drinkwitz said he liked the proven leadership and being a winner quarterback. Big part of it's just knowing how to win, and Drinkwitz seemed very impressed by that. Go ahead.
Yeah, and that was something that came up too when I was talking to his dad. I thought that was one of my favorite stories I've done just on Gavin and his recruitment. Is one of the things his dad mentioned. It was like they were thinking about leaving LaSalle. Like it just the coaching was more defensive focused. There just really wasn't someone there to help him, and they wanted him. He had aspirations, as many middle schoolers do, to play college football. And when he was first 2 years of high school, it just wasn't there. And they hired Brett Gordon, who held some records at LaSalle as a LaSalle alum. Gavin broke those. He broke those in his senior year. And even his dad mentioned, he gave me the records: 5-6 freshman year, 6-5 sophomore year, 10-1 the junior year, and then 12-1 going into the state playoff game on Saturday. So really turned it around, when Brett Gordon and his staff took over. And then Tim Taggart came back, of course, on that staff as the quarterbacks coach. And even Gavin posted to his Instagram story, he said 5-6 in the state title game. It was a big turnaround for that senior class. And that's not just Gavin. I mean, that's a very talented LaSalle team. 2 5-stars, or I guess 2 top 30 players, one of them being a 5-star, and Grayson McKee, who's an offensive lineman. Both Notre Dame commits there with Joey O'Brien as well, who we've done stories with Joey O'Brien talking about Gavin. I mean, there's some good overlap there. It's a very, very good team. And I also saw today, Kyle, that I think it was last night on Wednesday, they practiced in the Eagles indoor facility because it's pretty cold, as you know. The second time they've gotten to do that, they've done it before. At the beginning of the year, they went and practiced in the Steelers facility in Pittsburgh when they opened their year over there on that side of the state.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And yeah, you talked about it a little bit, but that kind of Philadelphia pipeline at quarterback is becoming an interesting storyline. Drinkwitz pointed out, just, it's an SEC team with a footprint in the Northeast now. That's a nice thing to have. We can move on to running back now. They only addition in the room ended up being Maxwell Warner. TJ Hodges had been committed for a long time, ended up flipping to Arkansas this past week. But what can you tell me about Warner at this point? And he's going to – we found out yesterday, 2 days ago, whenever, that Brendan Haygood is planning on entering the transfer portal. So that room is going to be a little bit smaller in front of Warner already.
I know a lot of people on the board have pointed it out. And I think, for a lot of us too, I was on another podcast earlier talking about it. And it kind of comes with, I think Missouri probably feels like they're in a good spot. Brendan Haygood probably noticed it, that there's going to be 3 returning running backs in front of him. And one of them was a freshman as well with him and played a little bit more. And Marquise Davis, who was the first freshman they went to in some of those cupcake games earlier in the season. And when you bring back Jamal Roberts, and if you can bring back Ahmad Hardy, who's probably the number one priority trying to bring back on that offense, that is a very good running back room. Again, those guys, what they did this past year, think about what they could do next year. That's just something that kind of comes with it. And, it's no slouch on Brendan Haygood. And, people, saying doesn't want to be developed, or, you don't want to chase the competition. It's just better. It's a betterment for the player. That's what the transfer portal's for. Get him an opportunity to play. They didn't come to college football to kind of sit around. And some guys like it. Some guys like the development process and stick around. Some of them, want their opportunity. And that's just what kind of happens. Same thing with James Madison, who's reportedly intends to enter the transfer portal per his agency, and guy who just kind of got passed up. He was very well liked. I mean, he was that spark plug of his signing class back in 2024. And it just unfortunately didn't work out. It's just what happens. It's an unfortunate part of college football. And, I think Missouri would wish them the best. I don't feel like there's ill will. We haven't heard any of that. But when you talk about this running back group, Loopers like to get 2-man classes. We've seen that the past couple of years, and saw it last year especially. You get a second running back right before signing day, and Brendan Haygood and Marquise Davis. I just realized that they both committed back-to-back days, or there might have been a day in between. Because I think Brendan Haygood committed on his birthday. So it's a good group when you got those guys returning. Maxwell Warner, I think a lot of people have told me or said it to me that it'd be fine to get a red shirt. He's a little bit newer to football. He didn't start playing until his freshman year. He was a soccer player, very well-rounded track and field athlete. Got into football, was on the defensive side of the ball for a little bit. They moved him to the offensive side, and talked to his stepdad a couple years ago, right after he was offered by Missouri. And, he was a big Walter Payton guy. They're from Chicago. And he was trying to get him to be one of this more old school backs, run someone over. But he's got a lot of athleticism too. So I think this can be an interesting one to see if he develops into what Missouri is hoping him to be. And he's got a lot of the tools, and getting on campus early is probably for the betterment of him.
Yeah, from the team perspective, you also have Tavoris Jones returning to that room as a redshirt senior. I haven't heard anything specific at this point. It wouldn't shock me if Tavoris hits the portal. He's really fast, really quick, and I think he's the type of guy who could succeed as the primary option if he were to, take a step away to a, new scenery, whatever. I think he has the talent to go be the primary guy somewhere else, and he's just been passed up in that room. But yeah, when you've got Ahmad Hardy, who, the team is spending a lot of focus this offseason trying to retain him because just about every school in the country is going to come with some type of offer for him. And then Jamal Roberts and Marquise Davis, who shined in limited opportunities last year. That's a lot of guys who have multiple years of eligibility left. Hardy should probably go to the NFL after next year, but Roberts has 2 more years. Davis will have 4 more years because he retained his red shirt. So it's just a pretty loaded room. That didn't surprise me that Haygood transferred out. Wouldn't surprise me if Tavoris Jones does the same. And kind of on the TJ Hodges flip, doesn't shock me that way either. There's just a lot of guys, very talented players at the front of that room right now who are going to be around for a while.
And before we get into the next offensive position, I think it's worth saying too. I mean, how many times have we said this about Tavoris Jones? We could have said this the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
It just hasn't happened yet. And some guys just like it. They like to stick around. We haven't spoken to Tavoris. I'm not even sure he's spoken to media outside of maybe the pre-fall camp when you could talk to anyone you wanted, if anyone got a chance to talk to Tavoris then. But yeah, he was a top guy, 250. Was a 4-star coming in from El Paso. But yeah, the TJ Hodges too was a little bit of a surprise. Came out of kind of, I wouldn't say out of nowhere, but I haven't heard from his his side of the family in a while. So it might have been writing on the wall that it possibly was happening. But Brian Silverfield coming into Arkansas, try to keep a lot of those good guys, good top guys in the state. He got Anthony Kennedy, he got Danny Beal, former Missouri targets. Ja'Cory Smith, who had visited Missouri at 1.2, linebacker who's previously committed to Oklahoma. They just try to keep all those guys there. And he had known him for a while. I mean, it's not very far away when he was in Memphis, so it makes the most sense.
Yeah. And you're right about Tavoris. He could have left the last couple of years kind of in similar situations and chose not to. So he very well might choose to just stick it out and be a Tiger for his full career, which good for him if that's what he wants to do. Let's flip to receiver. Tigers added Jabari Brady and Devion Hill-Lomax, 2 guys who Drinkwitz pointed out as kind of a good mix of size and speed. He said he wanted to add some size back into the room. Felt like, the 3 guys they got in last year's class were all very talented, but not all that big. So he said it's kind of a consistent balancing act between what you're adding into the receiver room with so many guys. So what can you tell me about those 2 right now?
Yeah, that makes the most sense. I was trying to help you with grades too, and we were talking about this, doing some recaps, and you went to talk with Drinkwitz and the rest of the media. And I was thinking about it, it's like, they wanted a third one. There was James Madison was out there. They offered Keon Hutchinson, who was a JUCO product. And, oddly enough, his quarterback at the JUCO ranks was Aiden Glover, former Missouri backup quarterback who entered the transfer portal, going to UT Martin now. I don't know if you saw that, Kyle. I think he posted on the board. Yeah. So pretty cool there. He was committed to Georgia State, I think, for a couple hours before that. So there's just those connections are always fun. But yeah, I thought maybe the grade would knock down a little bit because they had liked those 3-man wide receiver groups for a while. They tried to get James Madison, who ended up signing with Washington on campus. James said that didn't happen. He did get invited. He was kind of planning on it. There was a big recruiting weekend for that South Carolina game in September. But I think it's a good tall group. I know a lot of people have pointed that out, and it's been said a lot. I was thinking back, and maybe the grade would have been a little bit better if I thought about it from that perspective too, Kyle. I know some people are pretty high on Jabari. Was once like a top 30 recruit. And you just get passed up, expectations get set so high for you when you perform so well as an underclassman. And that just didn't really, I guess, live up to the standard that maybe some people thought that he would as a South Florida wide receiver, which sometimes a hotbed for that position. And he was a 3-star, posted 2 1,000 yard receiving years at his high school. So he has a good track record. He's going to get on campus early. He knows a lot of the guys already. He was very locked in for a while, even when some other schools would jump in and give him, just kind of see how he was doing. With Devion, he's not going to enroll early. He's the first guy we've talked about that won't enroll early. He told me after the DeSmet game when Edwardsville came into St. Louis to play DeSmet, he was like, I just got to be a kid a little bit longer. And Missouri's fine with that. They've said it before. This is like your last real stretch before, college athletics start and real life starts. So they were perfectly fine with some offensive linemen, some other guys to do that last year. He's going to play basketball, of course, as a 6'5" wide receiver. I think both these guys have a good wide receiver attitude too. Looking back on that 2025 class, all three of those guys might be slot options in the future. And Sean Terry's not the biggest. He could probably help you out on a return. I'm surprised they didn't really do that as much. But Demarion Folks, I think, is 5'8", 5'9", very speedy guy as well. So there's a little bit more height, like you said, and I think that makes the most sense. And I'm going to lump tight end in here as well. Isaac Jensen, the lone tight end. Talked to some people on the team in the past couple months. Only really expecting to do one tight end. You get one in the transfer portal and Gavin Hoffman. You kind of go from there, just see what that looked like. And we don't really know how that's going to look in the 2027 class. I've already got a good group of guys who wrote about it today on Mizzou Today, so you can go check out that. But Isaac brings some more like versatility. I think this year he put his hand in the dirt a lot more, kind of getting out of a 3-point stance for passes and also blocking. He also played at a Millard South school that was scoring touchdowns in 2 or 3 plays. Like if you go back and I implore a lot of people, go on Max Preps and look at Millard South scores. The school was kind of ridiculous on the way to state title. They got a loss in the first game because I think they had an ineligible coach on staff that just kind of messed up that, and they had to forfeit the win. But yeah, it has a very good team. Their quarterback, Jet Thamala, was a top Missouri target at one point. You have a lot of college players on that team. And Isaac played through a broken foot. He missed at the end of his junior season because of that. He had a screw, I think, in his ankle or his foot that kind of relieved a lot of that pain. And he went to the doctor this week. Don't know how that went, but he's going to enroll early. And he's a guy that has a lot of experience of winning. And I think that's probably a good plus for Missouri as well.
Team-wise, at receiver, you've got 3 guys who are running out of eligibility, including Logan Muckey, who played somewhat regular snaps, him, Xavier Lloyd, and Kevin Coleman. And you've got one already reported to the portal with James Madison, like we were talking about. It wouldn't shock me if there's another portal exit in there. I've talked about Marquise Johnson being a candidate. That wouldn't surprise me there, just because he seemed a bit unhappy by the end of the year. Again, another guy, I wouldn't be shocked if he stays either. That's just somebody who pops up in my mind when I think about possible exits. And with only 2 additions in this class, got to expect the Tigers to go out and maybe add at least 1, probably 2 guys, and then replacing if there's other exits as well. So probably an active portal search at receiver. Especially, you brought up the slot options. Mizzou moved Luther Burden into the slot his sophomore year, and that obviously worked really well for him. Wouldn't be shocked if they do something similar with one of those 3 young guys. Maybe that's where they see Alubade best. I feel like he's probably more valuable as that contested catch, deeper option on the outside, but maybe that's what they want to do long term. Who knows? Tight end, I don't see any reason to make any portal moves at this point unless there's unexpected exits. That room's pretty well set, losing Vince Brown and making the 1 addition in the class. But before we go to offensive line and finish up offense, why don't we hit our ad read here?
Yeah, a little quick read from our friends over at Roback. There's only one way to describe Roback: best fit, best feel. Actually down in Houston right now for an extended Thanksgiving break. I know it's been a week now, but I know you got yours on right now, Kyle. For those who aren't familiar with Roback, they're completely changing the game. They're incredibly comfortable activewear. Roback has released so many items within their new licensed game day collection, and it's our favorite. With novel polo designs and clean hoodie and Q-zip designs for some of your favorite schools, it's definitely worth checking out. Nobody else on the market is pairing these level of custom designs with this quality of active wear. Roback's everyday shorts or their Delta Performance pants are the perfect pairing as well. They're both super comfortable, have an elastic waistband, and great fabric that is made to have an appearance of a nice short look, but the comfort for a day on the move. Roback has also been proudly leading the NIL charge, having signed partnerships with multiple college football stars, past and present, and are becoming the go-to brand for college athletes across the country. Use the code MIZ20 on Roback.com for a generous 20% off for all new customers through the end of this week. That's spelled RHOBACK.com. That's 20% off all performance, polo shorts, and more with code MIZ20.
back to offensive line. I don't think we need to run through all 5 guys the way we have at other positions. We'd be here a long time. But like I just said, 5 additions. That's a pretty big class at offensive line. I asked Drinkwitz about that specifically in his press conference, if the size of the class was something he was really looking at. And he brought up that offensive line is a tough position to add in the portal, and it's a spot that is very developmentally focused. So he wants, as many guys to come get in Ryan Russell's strength program as early as possible, give them 3 years of working in that strength program and come out as, redshirt sophomores, redshirt juniors, ready to really contribute. It's an interesting look, especially because the Tigers are going to have to replace at least 3 of 5 starting offensive linemen, maybe 4, depending on if Caden Green turns pro. I'm not sure about that at this point. I haven't looked at his projections. I don't think they're as high at this point as they would have been at the beginning of the season. But, the Tigers had to replace 3 starting offensive linemen going into this year. They turned to the portal for 2 of them. Keegan Trost ended up being really good. Dominic Deitch ended up being
serviceable.
Serviceable is that's a good word for it.
Yeah, it is.
And then Curtis Piegler being the internal addition at right guard. So returning next year might just be Piegler, or it might be Piegler and Caden Green.
Jedice, he has another year of eligibility. I think it's like incorrect in certain places. I have seen that he has at least 1 more year.
Man, then I've been getting that wrong for a while, because I know he played 2 seasons at Michigan as a defensive lineman, and then I think 3 seasons as an offensive lineman, and then came to Mizzou. So I would be
That's
surprised.
Something I think maybe worth asking Mizzou, because I have heard that he might have another year, possibly.
I'll check in about that. Interesting, if that's the case. Could be fighting with Tristan Wilson to be the starting center if he does. But Mizzou probably wants to make a lot of those moves internally at this point, and I think probably add from the portal maybe 1, maybe 2 guys. They did a lot of portal additions last year that ended up being backups, so maybe expecting guys like Johnny Williams to step up this year. But what can you tell me? I got a little away from my recruiting talk there for a few minutes, but the primary guy in this group of 5 was Johnny Jones. What can you tell me about him at this point? And then does anybody else out of the other 4 really jump out to you?
Yeah, lone offensive tackle. I think one thing that really stood out to me is that you look at the past couple of years, Kyle, who are the lone 2 in-house offensive tackles? It's Javon Foster, which was, a while ago now. And then Armand Membu. And that was it. A lot of the guys that they've moved to offensive tackle, and Caden Green being one of them, moving from guard, he's still a transfer. I mean, even though if he was only gone for 1 year to Oklahoma, a lot of the options have been in the portal, and you can really rely on maybe some development for some of these interior guys. And that's why you kind of load up there. You got 3 spots, you bring in 4 guys so you can develop and take over those things. Bryson Wessel could be your center of the future, following in the footsteps of Connor Tollison from Jackson, Missouri. And but with Johnny Jones is that they really haven't had, consistency at developing the offensive tackle spot. They bring in a guy like Johnny Jones. I know he's been kind of seen as one of those more instant impacts in your breakdowns as well, talking about a guy that could probably be on the depth chart going into his first year. He's the only top Rivals 300 player in this class. He transferred to Venice, Florida High School for his senior year, and has familiarity with Damon Wilson, who played there. He knows Donovan Olubade well. He's going to come in early. His dad talked to me about that's a big deal. Even if Missouri says you can stay back, they really wanted him to get on the field and just have that opportunity. And they really liked Coach Jones and what he has in the development spot there for the offensive tackle position. And so I think this is a good foundation. It's exactly what they needed. They needed at least one big offensive tackle, and Johnny Jones being your top recruit is a really good sign. On the interior, you got Brandon Anderson. He's been locked in with Missouri for a while now, former Tennessee commit. Talk about Bryson Wessel, Iowa State commit. He's not going to enroll early. He's going to wrestle and throw shot put at Jackson to finish out his high school career. Braylon Ellison, of course, the Missouri legacy, coming in from Boonville as an early enrollee. But I'm going to go with Khalif Canty, KJ. I think KJ has a lot of upside here. I've just heard about it for a long time. I saw it in person at Rivals 5-star. he's very I don't know how to say this. He's like a student. And I know the student of the game is very coach speak. But when he was at Rivals 5-star, a lot of other guys joking around, just having a good time, eyes fixated on every single rep. He's doing push-ups in between reps. He's watching. He's did push-ups if he got beat. And one thing I remember is that I was messaging with someone at the Missouri side. I was like, these guys are kind of getting mad at him because he's kind of pushing back. And I remember KJ got like bull rushed by a defensive lineman during Rivals 5-star. And he's just going to give it right back to him. And I think that was a good thing, is that you're supposed to do all these finesse moves to get past people. He was holding his own when guys weren't supposed to be bull rushing, and he was holding his own. And former guy in the Rivals 250. We talk about offensive line freaks. I think he could be a guy that could do that in the future if everything works out for him. He's a 4-year starter at Cass Tech in Detroit, really turned around his body to be a good tackle for them. He fell short in the state championship, but I think KJ could be a future good interior offensive lineman for Missouri.
Yeah, I mentioned Jones as one of my instant impact guys right after the press conference. There's going to be so much turnover on that offensive line. I think there's a chance he works his way into the 2 deep by season's end, maybe. But you're kind of, I think, looking more at last year's class as guys maybe stepping up to that right now with, we're 3 good additions in last year's class too. So I think the Tigers have done well recruiting offensive line these past couple of years. And I think maybe that the struggles trying to pull in those top guys in the portal last year kind of led to wanting to build this bigger class. Where they didn't end up with so big a class, we can flip around to the defense. They had 9 total additions, 9 signees, and defensive end or / edge rusher, however we want to classify it, only ended up with 1 because of a late flip, but that one's pretty good. DeMarcus Johnson is the number 2 overall JUCO player in our rankings and number 1 edge rusher coming from the JUCO ranks. So what can you tell me about him at this point?
Yeah, number 1 actually by Rivals.
Is it?
ESPN and 247 both have him as nationally number 2, but still very good. We talk about instant impact. That could be your guy. If you're going to lose Damon Wilson, Zion Young to the NFL draft, I think you probably want to still address it in the portal, see what you can find, because you've hit on it so well with Zion and Damon Wilson. Maybe you can do that again. You have Darius Smith, you still has eligibility and can perform at one of those spots too. But DeMarcus could probably be that guy that puts his hand in the dirt. He's big, just like Zion Young. We have almost at 6'8", 260 pounds. He has familiarity with Brian Early as well. Brian Early recruited him out of high school. He's from Fort Bend Marshall in Missouri City. I was actually down there yesterday for Carter Stewart's signing ceremony for Missouri. And he was going to go to U of H in that 2024 class, ends up taking the JUCO route, redshirting this year to have another year of eligibility because he's already played 1 year in JUCO. And I think that's the guy that could probably be that instant impact. I know you lose Micah Nickerson. I know a lot of people were probably a little bit annoyed with that, but he had connections in Magnolia State as well. He spent the majority of his life there, went to Hickman for his freshman year of high school. I think he was born in Missouri. If he was, he only lived there for a couple years, maybe a couple months, not anything you can really remember too much from what his parents were telling me. And I mean, he's been a Mississippi kid forever. And I know people are saying, like, did he not see Missouri beat Mississippi State? At the end of the day, that's not really what matters. It's a lot about the future and what that holds. And for the future of DeMarcus Johnson, he could probably be the most impact-ready guy in this entire class.
Yeah, you mentioned losing both Zion and probably Damon Wilson. Damon's being projected into the first round of the next NFL draft. That's probably too much to not take, I think with the room sitting how it is, I look at it kind of similarly to how I looked at the room at the end of last year, where like it's good overall. There's a lot of talent in there and it's deep. Another top end guy to kind of be the leader like Damon this year really, really adds so much to the group. I mean, obviously, anytime you can add one of the top players available in the portal like Damon Wilson, it's going to increase the value of the room. But I think that, a room with Darius Smith and Langdon Kitchen and Nate Johnson, Javian Hilson, Dayton Hopkins, and now DeMarcus Johnson is a really quality group if you have a top end guy to kind of pair with Darius as the starters. I think that's kind of what caps off this room really, really well and makes it another year of being one of the better rooms, or one of the better edge rusher rooms around the country. Defensive tackle, end up with just Taj Overton. Good one to just end up with. One of the higher ranked recruits in the class for Mizzou, but the Tigers clearly wanted more in that group. So what can you tell me about Overton and kind of what Mizzou's strategy was at DT?
Yeah, it was a little bit late. You lose Al Davis in May. That probably throws a wrench in maybe the plans and maybe some of those relationships. Talk about losing Anthony Kennedy. He decommitted the day that Al Davis resigned from the defensive line spot. But there's still a lot of respect and a lot of things to be excited about with this defensive tackle spot. Chris McClellan had a great year. You saw some guys behind him really step up and have good years as well. And I think it's maybe still a position that you'd want to find a Chris McClellan again, someone that can come in that has SEC experience, or at least, high Power 4 experience and with multiple years of eligibility. And I think that would work out well for them. But Dave Blackwell has done a good job. He's done a good job recruiting them as well. They were still looking at Danny Beal, of course, and Anthony Kennedy. Taj Overton really got locked in. I think after that first visit, I remember watching him around the field. He knows Chris McClellan well. I think that definitely helps. They're both Owasso kids from Oklahoma. Getting him on campus early is going to be big. I think they like the future of some of these guys at the defensive tackle spot. It's more of one of those positions that's very hard to break through and be an instant impact. I'm going back in the 2025 class. It was only Jason Dowell, of course, that signed from that one, nearby kid in Illinois. So another nearby one in Oklahoma. And we're looking maybe for a second guy there for a little while. Emmanuel Ruffin, who is a former Colorado commit, flipped to Ohio State, ended up not going to Missouri. So I think it's a good spot to be in. Probably just bringing in one or two each year. And Taj was very locked in. I think after that first visit, he came back for his official visit, waited a couple of days, had his graphics ready. The former Oklahoma State committed to Missouri. And I think he's been very supportive too. He hasn't ever answered my message or anything, but he follows me and he likes everything about the other commits. So I think he's just seems very excited for this team.
Yeah, the second year of only bringing in one in the class is probably not, obviously by who they were also trying to target and flip late. They wanted to add more to the room. Next year, or I guess this offseason, you're losing Chris McClellan, Sterling Webb, and Braylon Henderson. 3 guys gone, only 1 brought in. So that seems like a prime spot to probably make multiple additions in the portal. Marquise Graciel's the only returning guy that has real playing experience, and Jalen Marshall's played a good amount of snaps now across the past couple of years, but hasn't been relied upon to be one of the primary guys before. And then you've got Elias and Sam Williams. Man, am I blanking on the rest of the room now, outside of Jason Dowell? But
I think you got most of it.
I think I get there's a couple.
Oh man,
Justin Bodford.
Bodford, yes, Justin Bodford,
Yeah.
yes.
So at this point, you'd be asking a lot from guys who haven't had major roles or even really rotational roles to kind of step up and be impact starters. So it feels like a spot where the Tigers are going to seriously try to hit the portal. I know they tried last year to get at least, one primary guy there, ended up with Braylon Henderson. So, it's not the easiest spot to really get a lot of success. As you mentioned, it's not a spot where guys come in immediately and have success. So it's another long-term developmental position, but we'll see what the Tigers end up doing there. Linebacker brought in 2 in JJ Bush and Keenan Harris. There we go.
Mm-hmm.
So what can you tell me? I know you've had a good few chances to see Keenan Harris play out in St. Louis. So and the Tigers really wanted to where was JJ Bush committed originally?
Arkansas. Yeah.
Arkansas. So they wanted that flip badly. I know that much. But what can you tell me about that pair?
I'll lump in the safeties here, and I'll explain why, because I haven't said this yet. But Keenan Harris and JJ Bush at one point, were seen as safeties. They were these kind of big-bodied safeties, and I think they grew out of those positions. Keenan Harris, of course, in his high school season, probably a little bit more explosive on offense because they ran a package called the the Hellcat formation, and it was really just he just hit his hands twice. And the second hit, you snap the ball and he runs forward because he was just so hard to take down. And so that they have a lot of athleticism in these two linebackers, and I think that they fit so well in the sense of where maybe the linebacker position is going. Of course, it's always good to have a guy like Josiah Trotter, who played probably very similar to his dad and his brother, and just very hard-nosed linebacker who can do a lot. But have these guys that have some coverage skills too. I think that's a big one. People kind of forget too that Jacob Yoro was the safeties coach, was recruiting JJ Bush before D-Nick came over from Miami. Derek Nicholson has known JJ Bush forever. He offered him at Miami in January 2024. So we're coming up almost 2 years on this relationship. Mari Bland played a big part in trying to get him here too, or get him to Missouri as well, with just his connections through the South, and get a guy that played offense as well, just like Keenan Harris. I think that's one of those good things. One of the prompts that we got for superlatives after the signing class was like boom or bust, and I think that's a little bit harsh to do that to a, try to put those on a high schooler. I think it works a little bit more with transfers, but I was thinking boom. I think this could be a boom for JJ Bush for how much he's been kind of tied to D-Nick in that department. Do I think both of them or either of them would be instant impact? I don't necessarily think that. I think they probably could use some seasoning, but I mean, heck, if they can figure that out, that's a win for Missouri. On the safety side, though, you get three. You lose Tony Forney on signing day, a little bit of surprise. Even Missouri was surprised about that when I got a call about it, just kind of trying to get my thoughts. And I was like, well, they didn't answer my text. Maybe that was writing on the wall that something wasn't trending the right way. My dogs are a little bit excited about this one, but I think J.D. McAreavy might be the heart of this safety spot, and that's, you can tell by the rankings too. Rivals Industry 4-star, going to come in early. He has a very good basketball background. He played both ways at his high school in Des Moines at Valley, and I just think he could be one of those Marvin Burks types that could probably give you some stretch at the beginning. I said a similar thing about Trajan Greco when he was signed, and I think Greco probably could have played a little bit more in a room that didn't have as many just safety depth. I'm not just saying it was the best safety room, but there was a lot of guys during Trajan Greco's freshman year in 2024 and didn't really get a chance to break through. If you lose some guys, this year, I think maybe J.D. McAreavy could be in that rotation, maybe at least on the depth chart and try to get in there. I don't think maybe he'll have as big of a Marvin Burks role, but I think in the perfect world that, if he comes in at the same time as Marvin Burks, he probably was competing at the same time for snaps. So I really like J.D. McAreavy in that spot. You got Carter Stewart as well, who's going to be enrolling early with Brody Jones. Both guys flipped. Brody Jones from Cincinnati. I guess they all flipped. J.D. McAreavy from Louisville, but was once seen probably as a Missouri lean during the summer. Brody Jones coming from Cincinnati, and then Carter Stewart coming over from Utah. They're both late risers. Jacob Yoro saw something in both of them. Bo Els, the defensive graduate assistant who works with safeties as well. And that's the safety room. Getting them all on campus is probably early is a good thing.
All right, I'll hit on the team positioning at the linebacker. You're losing Tristan Newsome and Khalil Jacobs. I think Josiah Trotter is being projected as like a top 40-ish guy in the NFL draft, so there's a moderate chance he might just take that. I think he's a little bit less likely than Damon Wilson at this point, but top 40 for a interior linebacker is really good. They're just like, you don't get a ton of middle linebacker types who are first-round picks anymore. So if you're being projected kind of top end of the second round, that's still pretty good for that spot. So you might be flipping most of that room with just Nicholas Rodriguez returning from the primary rotation, but you do have Jeremiah Beasley, who is pretty highly regarded and probably would have played a bigger role this year if the Tigers hadn't hit the portal so hard at linebacker last year. End up a little bit different because of Newsome's return. And there's some other talented guys still in that room. So when you're talking about instant impact for those two, I agree. I think JJ Bush has a chance to maybe kind of be in the spot Nicholas Rodriguez was last year, where you get in against a cupcake and maybe show a little something that gets you an opportunity later in the season. But there's a lot of young guys in there kind of right in front of him. And I expect the Tigers to probably make at least one addition to that room, especially if Trotter ends up leaving. Then you probably want to make it one or two that are primary rotation type of guys. And then rely on probably Rodriguez and Beasley as your two other primary rotation guys. By the end of the year, it was mostly Trotter and Rodriguez especially those final couple of games. So, the Tigers fluctuated between a 2-man rotation and a 4-man rotation at their 2 primary linebacker spots like that. Safety-wise, you're losing Dalen Carnell and Jalen Catalon, but by the end of the year, Catalon wasn't playing a ton. So you return Marvin Burks, of course, and then Santana Banner, who had taken over for Catalon kind of the second half of the season. Santana Banner played a pretty decent-sized role and was impressive. Mose Phillips' role kind of grew over those last few weeks or so. Not to a huge role, but constantly increasing, which is a sign that going into next year, he might just end up being that third starter. But like you talked about with McAreavy, there's a chance he has that kind of Marvin Burks freshman year role where he's getting involved, but isn't necessarily relied upon. And I think that's probably the best spot for him to be, maybe like a deep rotational guy, because the Tigers hit safety hard in the portal last year. And other than Catalon, targeted guys with multiple years of eligibility. So Banner has, I think, 2 more. Phillips, I think, has 1 more. So you've got those 2 mixed with Marvin Burks and, a couple of other young safeties. CJ Bass is pretty highly thought of from last year's class. Maybe he's a guy that as a redshirt freshman gets more and more involved. Should be interesting to see how that room kind of develops. And you mentioned Brody Jones, got him flipping from cornerback, or signing as a safety instead of a corner where he's listed on our rankings. So you end up with 2 corners in the class. There's going to be a lot of change at that.
He's going to be a safety, so that it's wrong on our rankings still. I've asked it to be changed twice, but he is going to be a safety at Missouri.
Okay, so is that then 1 corner in the class?
2. So you got
2.
Ahmad Billings, 2. He was listed as an athlete at one point, but him and Jackson Gates are the 2 corners.
Right.
And I will mention, you were talking about this reminded me, Nick Bolton was a kind of in that 58 to 60 range in the second round as a linebacker for Missouri. So if anyone has done it before, it's Nick Bolton, and Josiah Trotter could probably be that next one.
All right. Oh, with those 2 corners, there's going to be a lot of turnover in that room. You're losing all 3 of the primary rotation. So what can you tell me about those 2 and whether you think they're the type of guys who can make an impact early on?
I think Jackson Gates would be the better option as like an thinking of someone that could make an early impact. Very speedy corner, comes from California. Damian and Laverne. He's like from the same, like 10 minutes away from where Jared Russell's from in California, the strength coach. So there's good familiarity there. They talked about it during his visit. He's very fast. And Keenan Harris came up to me during one of his Missouri visits. It was the Mississippi State game, the home finale. He said, man, like I was blown away. I think he ran a 10.39 in the 100-yard dash. That's his personal best. Great speed, kind of great length as well. And of course, like many of these best players at these high schools, they matched them up against the other best players. Didn't always have the most stats. And I think that's a good thing about these cornerbacks. So you don't have all these stats. And give him a second. I think for Ahmad Billings, it's a little bit different. He's not going to enroll early. He's a 3-sport athlete in high school, so he'll still be doing athletics most likely. Basketball player, runs track and field, so he's got a lot to do as well. But he was a late riser, very lengthy. SEC speed is what Coach Pogue liked, and his family knows Coach Pogue's family. Like there's good overlap between their relatives, and gets him out of Alabama. And I know like it wasn't like choosing over the best other schools. He was thinking about going to visit Florida, but was never offered. But he could be a guy that maybe down the line. But I think Jackson Gates would be the more of the best bet to be more of an impact guy right away.
If I were to guess right now, I mean, I agree that Gates is probably the more likely. I doubt either of them are instantly on the 2 deep or in the rotation or anything like that. I mentioned the Tigers are losing all 3 of the primary rotation. That's Toriano Pride, Stephen Hall, and Drayton Norwood. Nick DeLoach returns after being a rotational / starter for 2024. So I expect he's probably the primary guy in the room next year. Cameron Keys was somebody who got shouted out a lot during fall camp as kind of making big strides. If he can do that again, then he could turn into the second option. But that seems like a room that the Tigers are going to try to hit pretty hard in the portal. Drinkwitz slipped up a little bit on one of the questions during his press conference, which I can't remember exactly what the question was, but it was about, the processing plan or creating the plan for what you want to do in the portal. And Drinkwitz was trying to say, you come up with the idea, that there's a position one you want to pick or you want to hit. And so you say, okay, we want 2 guys there. He accidentally said, so we want 2 corners there. It's like, oh, so you want 2 corners. Okay. And it was a funny moment where Drinkwitz kind of stuttered and like, cut. Can we stop? Because he realized after a second. So the Tigers are going to try to hit corner in the portal, probably for multiple options. I worry a little bit because there seems to be a adjustment period for corner more than some other spots with the Tigers. I'm not really sure specifically why that is, but we saw it with Toriano Pride in 2024. You saw it with Stephen Hall this year. There was just some struggles early in the season for both of them, and with Pride through a lot of 2024, even though he was, one of the better corners available in the portal that year. And I think it's a spot where if that were to happen again, you don't want it to happen to the primary guys that you're relying on heavily, right? So if you go out and you get 2 starting corners and they both have to have that adjustment period, then you're going through 4, 5, 6 weeks of corners who are having communication issues on handoffs with the safeties, or just aren't in the right spot necessarily because they just haven't gotten drilled into them enough times exactly where they need to be on the plays that Mizzou likes to run, which is why I think you're looking at Nick Deloach probably as the primary guy. Even if they were to go out and add multiple guys, he at least has a full multi-year understanding of the system, which is going to be an advantage over anyone who you bring in at that spot, unless you get guys who are physically gifted enough to just go out and play man coverage consistently, in which case I figure you would just be fine, because if you're talented enough physically to just play man coverage, then you just stick on your guy, right? There's a little less to know and understand about that type of coverage. But that's a big ask, and you would still, have to mix up play zone somewhat consistently. So there's still that base understanding that you need to have. So I think they're good ads at corner, but probably longer term developmental guys who I wouldn't expect to see playing on defense much this year. Special teams with all of the defensive players especially is a little bit different of a thing. I think you could see the linebackers, the safeties, maybe the corners playing on kick coverage, pump coverage early on. A couple of this year's freshmen burned their red shirt there.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else you'd like to add about the defense specifically?
Yeah, I'll say, I don't know what the future holds for Nick Deloach. It is a very intriguing spot he was in, being a guy that was jumped out of nowhere to take snaps away from experienced cornerbacks, and then you get pushed out the door and you're just a special teamer. And we saw him a lot, running down the field. He was a gunner. He was all about it on special teams. I wonder, if there's, you never want to point on someone saying that maybe that there's they would transfer. We said it before, these guys that maybe they could lean that way. I do wonder if maybe there is greener grass somewhere else. It's just kind of it's an intriguing spot, because you go down a spot and then you're gonna have to kind of fight your way back up. You don't see it too often in this era, but all the credit to him if he does that and he can get back into that room and be in that rotation among those top 3 guys at cornerback. And that's really just my last thought on that position.
I'll say I was surprised at the lack of his opportunities at corner this season as a whole. Coming into the year after the addition of Stephen Hall, I figured the Tigers would just go with a 4-man rotation at corner. They only went 3. It was the primary three who are all now out of eligibility after this season. And Deloach just, was absent basically on defense. But before we finish up, I'd like to ask you a little bit about special teams. We didn't get any specific special team signings on signing day. But I think Mizzou fans probably want to hear about it a little bit after some struggles this year. So what can you tell me about, the Tigers' plan at this point for additions across special teams specifically?
Yeah, there were a couple guys like that popped up throughout the year. There was like a kicker that went to Georgia State or Georgia Tech and Texas, and I don't remember all their names right now. Even someone I think that went to Toledo. That's a pretty good opportunity to probably play a little bit early. I don't know what the roster looks like there. But there really wasn't anyone down the stretch. A little bit more of a focus on 2027. I think you have to. I mean, you're going to have to go. You're going to get a portal punter. Like that's you can't rely probably. Is it John Butcher to be your punter next year as your primary guy? Kicker, I don't really know where you go either. Like that's an interesting one. Robert Meyer.
Blake Craig will be back, so I would be surprised if they make a kicker addition, because if nobody leaves, you're looking at a 3-man room with Blake Craig, Robert Meyer, and Oliver Robbins now, and Robbins played well in the very limited opportunities at the end of the year, so I don't see why you couldn't run into the season with those three if they all stick around. Of course, that's always the caveat here. Punter, different question. I mean, Wesselman is out of eligibility anyways, I think. So you're going to have to make a move there, and I doubt it's bringing in a late arriving true freshman in the secondary signing period. So portal is probably the main option at punter there, I would expect as well.
Yeah, I think that's just probably where the mindset went, just with special teams. I mean, heck, we can't for certain tell you who the special teams coordinator will be next year either. We just don't really know how it's going to shape up, if there's going to be, a review of all these of the coordinators and try to figure things out, if they're going to move on from Eric Link or just, give them another year. We don't really know. We don't know where that's going to go. But I think they're fine. In long snapper, you usually carry two guys, and I think it was what's Crosby? Henry Crosby. Sorry, we've been talking for a long time. Henry Crosby's dad even pointed out that he got to play in that game against Arkansas. There's our Arkansas recap. Henry Crosby played in that game, the backup long snapper. Brett LeBlanc's coming back
after two rough snaps from Brett LeBlanc.
Yeah. Who Brett was, an All-American.
Brett was great all year. Just a tough day, in some pretty bad conditions, but that did get Henry the chance.
Yeah, so I think you're fine there. Kicker, I mean, you got Ryder Goodwin in that spot as well. They brought him from the JUCO ranks. I don't know where that goes from here, if he's going to stick around his depth. But I think punter is your best bet, that you're going to go out and find some transfers to replace Connor.
All right. As you said, we've been talking for a long time, so I think we can kind of wrap it up here. Do you think there's anything else that we specifically need to hit on? Anything that you remember from Drinkwitz's press conference that you think I need to hit on before we wrap up?
No, I'm sure a lot of more of the comments on the future and how you build rosters will come up as we get through the portal season. If more names pop up, and you can kind of revert back to some of those comments by Drink, will be a good spot there. And I keep thinking about this kicker position. I wonder if Oliver Robbins earned himself a job elsewhere too. Like he came in from Florida Memorial as a walk-on, probably wasn't expecting to play that much, made a couple of good field goals in his stretch. I don't think he really had too many issues with kickoffs. I don't really have any notable memories of him having any lapses there. So that's kind of been in my mind too. It's like, if he knows he's not going to play next year, if he'll only do kickoffs, maybe he will stick around, or maybe just stick around in general. You just never know. I do wonder if anyone else would be interested in him, because he did have some pretty good film that he could put out there. That's the last thing I got.
Yeah. That is interesting. I'll say Drinkwitz didn't talk specifically about a bunch of individual guys. There obviously he had comments on Sidwar and the receivers, but it wasn't a lot of questions about like, can you tell us about this guy? Can you tell us about this guy? Can you tell us about this guy? Like we've been doing here. It was more bigger picture stuff, which I think is pretty interesting. I've been putting out a couple of stories on that. I have a couple of more coming. There was some interesting stuff there about kind of roster construction in this new era, especially with revenue sharing being a different setup than NIL was these past few years, and how that's affecting players and their support staff and whoever else is advising them and all of that stuff, their parents, agents, whatever. Just everybody is figuring out this new system at the same time and kind of how it works on both ends of it. So there's some interesting stuff there that I'll have in stories across the next couple of days. And yeah, like you said, portals opening January 2nd. We're going to talk a lot about it for those couple of weeks, and I'm sure talk a lot about the impact afterward.
Well, certainly. And we know of 3 entries right now. I mentioned them earlier: Brendan Haygood, James Madison, and then Corey Flagg, right? Corey Flagg? Right. I always forget which Flagg brother I'm talking about. The safety. Caleb Flagg. Sorry, I was Caleb Flagg. The safety who probably would have had a bigger role maybe if he stuck around, but it's probably for the betterment too, to just use that red shirt and then go use that last year of eligibility and play a little bit more. So that's going to do it for this episode of the Mizzou Today Show. If you're a Mizzou Today lifer, or I guess we haven't been around that long, but if you know us pretty well, the Friday File will have Kyle's name on it again on Friday. So enjoy that. He's got, like he mentioned, some more stories coming in from that Drinkwitz press conference over the next couple of days, and he'll have your coverage for you this Sunday. Crazy to think, border war already happening. Sorry we didn't do a preview, just a lot going on this week. But we'll recap that game next week, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about the transfer portal or anything else that comes up in the football world, with the bowl games being announced soon as well. You can find Kyle and get all of his work and his updates coming up here with basketball, football, and the transfer portal at Kyle_MCAREAVY on X, formerly Twitter. And you can find us at MizzouToday.com. Join for $1. You can jump in with us with that deal. And we will see you guys next week.